They said the house had been demolished years ago. They said nothing remained except an empty field beyond the willow trees. Then, the fog arrived. And when it lifted, Carrington Hall had returned. Its family vanished more than 20 years ago. Yet someone was still playing the piano. And someone was waiting at the upstairs window. Welcome back to Short Ghost Stories, long after midnight. The house at Willow End. The rain began shortly after sunset. Benjamin Grant watched the drops race one another down the carriage window as the road wound deeper into the forest. The last village had vanished nearly an hour earlier. Since then, there had been nothing but trees, ancient trees. Their trunks rose like pillars from the darkness, their roots twisting through the earth like the bones of something buried long ago. The branches met high above the road, forming a black canopy that swallowed what little light remained in the evening sky. The carriage lamps illuminated only a few yards ahead, revealing wet leaves, muddy ruts, and occasional stretches of pale mist drifting between the trunks. Everything beyond that narrow circle of light remained hidden. Benjamin shifted uneasily in his seat. He was not a superstitious man. During his years as a schoolmaster, he had heard every sort of ghost story imaginable. Entire countries seemed determined to frighten themselves with tales of haunted roads and wandering spirits. There was something about this forest that unsettled him. Perhaps it was the silence. Rain fell steadily. The wheels rolled through mud. The horse breathed heavily. Yet, somehow the forest itself seemed silent. No birds, no insects, no rustle of animals moving through the undergrowth. Nothing. As though the woods were listening. The driver sat hunched beneath his coat, saying little. Benjamin had attempted conversation several times during the journey and received only brief replies in return. Now, even those had ceased. The horse suddenly tossed its head. The carriage lurched. "What is it?" Benjamin called. The driver glanced toward the trees. "Nothing." But his voice lacked conviction. The horse slowed. Its ears flattened. For several seconds, it seemed unwilling to continue. The driver snapped the reins. "Move on." The animal obeyed reluctantly. Benjamin frowned. "You seem nervous." The driver spat into the darkness. "I don't like this road after sunset." "Why?" No answer came. Benjamin leaned closer to the window. Mist drifted between the trees. At first it appeared ordinary enough. Then he noticed something peculiar. The fog was not moving with the wind. It stood motionless among the trunks. Tall, pale shapes, almost human in outline, watching. Benjamin blinked. The shapes dissolved at once. Only mist, nothing more. A sensible man must be careful when he allows himself to imagine. The carriage continued. The darkness deepened. Then, without warning, a sound drifted through the forest. A piano. one soft note, clear as a bell. Benjamin sat upright. The note lingered, faded. Then another followed. A simple melody, distant, melancholy, entirely impossible. He pushed open the small window behind the driver. "Did you hear that?" The man stiffened. "Hear what?" "The piano." The driver snapped the window shut. Benjamin stared. The melody continued for several moments before fading completely. After that, neither man spoke. The forest seemed darker than before. At length, the trees began to thin. Cold air swept across open ground. The carriage emerged from the woodland and onto a narrow road bordered by fields. Far ahead, a handful of yellow lights glimmered through the mist. The village. Willow End. Benjamin felt unexpectedly relieved. The driver slowed the horse. Moments later, they reached a small stone bridge spanning a shallow stream. There, the carriage stopped. Benjamin looked around. The village is still ahead. Aye. Then why are we stopping? The driver climbed down. Because this is where I leave you. Benjamin laughed. You cannot be serious. The man removed the luggage from the rear of the carriage. I don't cross this bridge after dark. What nonsense is that? The driver avoided his gaze. Best walk the rest. It is raining. It is not far. Benjamin stepped down reluctantly. The driver handed him his case. Within seconds, he had turned the carriage around. The horse required no encouragement. It departed at once. Benjamin watched the carriage disappear toward the forest. The driver never looked back. For a long moment, he stood alone beside the bridge. Rain whispered across the fields. Mist drifted low over the ground. Ahead lay Willow End. Behind him stretched the dark road disappearing into the woods. Then, faintly, from somewhere far within those trees, he heard a single piano note again. Benjamin turned sharply. The forest stood silent, empty. He could not shake the feeling that something had followed him to the edge of the village. Something waiting beyond the darkness. He adjusted his coat and continued toward the lights. The fox and thistle stood beside the churchyard wall. It was an old inn, timber-framed and slightly crooked with age. Warm yellow light glowed from its windows, casting narrow rectangles across the wet road. For the first time since entering the forest, Benjamin felt some measure of comfort. He stepped inside. The warmth hit him immediately. A fire burned in the hearth. 3 men occupied a table near the window. Behind the counter stood a broad-shouldered woman polishing glasses. She looked up as Benjamin entered. You'll be Mr. Grant. I am. Martha Briggs. She nodded toward the register. Sign there. Benjamin complied. The innkeeper studied him for a moment. You came through the forest after dark? Yes. A strange expression crossed her face. Not many do. The men by the window exchanged glances. Benjamin noticed it immediately. Something was wrong. The atmosphere inside the inn felt strained, expectant, as though everyone had been waiting for news. Before he could ask, the church clock outside struck 8. The room fell silent. One of the men stood abruptly. "Good night." The others followed. Within moments, the parlor was nearly empty. Benjamin watched them leave. "Friendly place," Martha snorted. "They'll talk tomorrow." "Why not tonight?" The innkeeper glanced toward the window. Beyond the glass, the fog thickened. "You arrived on the wrong evening." Benjamin looked outside. "What is special about tonight?" For several seconds, Martha said nothing. Then she shook her head. "Nothing you'll believe." Benjamin smiled. "Try me." The innkeeper set down her glass. "Have you ever heard of Carrington Hall?" The name meant nothing to him. "No." "Then perhaps that's for the best." Before Benjamin could question her further, a shout erupted outside. Then another. A door slammed. Footsteps pounded along the road. Martha hurried toward the entrance. Benjamin followed. Several villagers had gathered in the lane. All were staring toward the far end of the village, toward the willow field. The fog rolled thick and white across the landscape. Someone pointed. "There!" Benjamin squinted. At first he saw nothing. Then the mist shifted, and his breath caught in his throat. A house stood beyond the willows. A great Victorian manor. Dark, silent, impossible. For several moments, nobody spoke. The villagers simply stared. The house appeared ancient, weathered, as though it had stood there for generations. Yet the expressions around him told a different story. "What is it?" Benjamin asked. No one answered. Finally, Martha Briggs spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Carrington Hall." Benjamin looked at her. "You know this house?" Martha nodded slowly. Then she said something that made no sense whatsoever. And somewhere deep inside the fog, beyond the willows, a faint piano melody began to play. The piano melody drifted across the field for only a few seconds before fading into silence. No one moved. The villagers remained standing in the road, staring toward the manor as though afraid that looking away might somehow allow it to come closer. Benjamin studied the house carefully. Even through the fog, he could make out remarkable details. The steep slate roof, the tall chimneys, the ivy climbing one side of the brickwork, the front porch with its heavy columns. Nothing about it appeared unreal. Nothing suggested an illusion. It stood solidly upon the earth, exactly where the villagers claimed nothing had stood the day before. "Who owned it?" Benjamin finally asked. No one answered. Several people turned away. Others began walking back toward their homes. The gathering dissolved with surprising speed. Within moments, only Martha Briggs remained beside him. The innkeeper kept her eyes fixed on the manor. "I haven't seen it since I was a girl," she said quietly. "You've seen it before?" "Before they tore it down." Benjamin glanced at her. And you truly believe that's the same house? I know it is. How? The porch lanterns. Benjamin looked again. 2 lanterns hung on either side of the front door. Dark now, motionless. What about them? They've always been there. The innkeeper's expression tightened. My grandmother used to say she could recognize Carrington Hall from 5 miles away, just by those lanterns. A cold wind swept across the road. The fog shifted. For an instant, Benjamin thought he saw movement in one of the upper windows. A pale shape. A face, perhaps. Then it vanished. He rubbed his eyes. Nothing remained. Only darkness. Come inside, Martha said. Why? Because it will be midnight soon. Benjamin almost laughed. And? The innkeeper met his gaze. Because nothing good ever happens near that house after midnight. The following morning dawned gray and wet. Benjamin slept poorly. Several times during the night he had awakened with the peculiar sensation that someone was standing outside his room, listening. Each time he opened the door and found the hallway empty. After breakfast, he decided to visit the field. The villagers watched him leave. No one attempted to stop him. That, somehow, was more unsettling than if they had. The road wound through low grass and scattered willow trees. As he approached the manor, its size became increasingly apparent. From the village, it had seemed merely large. Up close, it was enormous. 3 stories, nearly 40 windows. Broad stone steps leading to a pair of heavy oak doors. The building possessed the silent confidence of great age, yet something about it felt wrong. Benjamin could not immediately identify what. Then he realized there were no signs of weathering. Not really. The bricks were old, the windows dusty, the iron gate rusted, yet everything appeared frozen, as though time had touched the house once and then forgotten to continue. The gate stood open. Benjamin entered. The gravel path crunched beneath his boots. No birds sang. No insects buzzed. Even the wind seemed reluctant to cross the property. At the foot of the porch steps, he paused. The brass plate beside the door remained visible beneath decades of tarnish. Carrington Hall. He raised the iron knocker. The sound echoed through the house. Deep, hollow, endless. No answer came. He tried the handle. The door opened immediately. The entrance hall beyond was vast. A broad staircase rose toward the upper floors. Portraits lined the walls. Dust covered every surface. Yet once again Benjamin felt that peculiar contradiction. The house looked abandoned, but not empty. Sunlight filtered weakly through the tall windows. Its pale beams illuminated countless particles drifting in the air. Benjamin stepped forward. The door closed behind him. The sound echoed through the manor. He found himself listening, waiting. Nothing. Only silence. To his left stood a drawing room. To his right, a library. Ahead lay a long corridor disappearing into shadow. Benjamin entered the library first. Hundreds of books still occupied the shelves. Most were covered in dust. One was not. He noticed it immediately. The dust around it remained undisturbed. The book itself looked recently handled. Benjamin frowned. He crossed the room, touched the cover. The leather felt cold, not unusual. Yet, as he withdrew his hand, he noticed something else. The dust upon the table had not settled evenly. Someone had moved the book recently. A ridiculous thought entered his mind. Perhaps another curious villager had visited. Yet somehow that explanation felt insufficient. The room carried no signs of human presence. No footprints. No disturbed furniture. Nothing. He opened the book. The pages contained poetry. Victorian love poems. Several passages had been marked lightly in pencil. One line caught his attention. Some houses remember more faithfully than men. Benjamin stared at the sentence, then laughed quietly. Coincidence, nothing more. He closed the book. A sound echoed somewhere upstairs. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate. Benjamin froze. The sound came again. One step, then another, moving slowly across the upper floor. His heartbeat quickened. "Hello?" he called. No answer. He waited. Nothing. Perhaps part of the house settling, old wood contracting. A perfectly reasonable explanation. Yet reason felt strangely fragile within Carrington Hall. He left the library and crossed the entrance hall. At the base of the staircase stood a grandfather clock. Its dark wooden case towered above him. The pendulum hung motionless. Benjamin examined the face. The hands indicated 11:47. Odd. He checked his pocket watch. 10:30. The clock had stopped long ago. Nothing remarkable. Then he noticed another clock, a smaller one above the fireplace. 11:47. His eyes narrowed. He entered the dining room. A third clock stood upon a sideboard. 11:47. A fourth in the morning room. 11:47. Every clock in Carrington Hall displayed the same time. A chill passed through him. The explanation should have been simple. Someone had stopped them deliberately. Yet the uniformity felt strangely deliberate, almost ceremonial. As though the entire house had paused at the exact moment. Benjamin looked toward the staircase. The upper floor waited in silence. Somewhere above him lay the answers, and somewhere beyond those answers lingered the mystery of a family who had vanished more than 20 years earlier without leaving so much as a single trace behind. Taking a deep breath, Benjamin placed one foot upon the first stair. And from somewhere far above, hidden deep within the silent house, a piano began to play. The piano melody drifted through the upper floor like a memory that had forgotten whom it belonged to. Benjamin remained motionless on the staircase. The music was unmistakable now. A slow, sorrowful piece. Not loud, not dramatic, merely present. as though someone sat patiently in another room, unaware they were being overheard. The melody rose and fell for several moments before stopping abruptly. The silence that followed felt heavier than the music itself. Benjamin continued climbing. Each step creaked softly beneath his weight. The upper landing stretched before him in a long corridor lined with closed doors and faded portraits. Dust covered the floorboards, yet something immediately caught his attention. There was a single set of footprints. Not recent, not ancient. Simply there. Beginning near the far end of the corridor and disappearing beneath one of the doors. Benjamin stared. They were small. A young woman's, perhaps. He followed them. The corridor seemed longer than it should have been. The farther he walked, the more distant the staircase appeared behind him. Eventually he reached the door. His hand hesitated upon the handle. Then he pushed it open. The room beyond was a music room. A grand piano stood beside a tall window. Dust covered everything. Everything except the piano stool. The dust there had been disturbed. Benjamin approached slowly. On the piano rested a framed photograph. A young woman. Dark hair. Intelligent eyes. 17 years old, perhaps. Rose Carrington. He knew it instantly. Not because her name appeared anywhere, but because she seemed familiar, as though he had seen her somewhere before, perhaps in a dream, perhaps in the window the previous night. Benjamin lifted the photograph. The glass was cold. Then, without warning, the piano played a note. His heart nearly stopped. The key beneath his hand remained untouched. Yet the sound echoed through the room. Another note followed, then another. A melody slowly assembled itself beneath visible fingers. Benjamin stepped backward. The temperature had fallen noticeably. The room darkened. Not gradually, suddenly, as though a cloud had passed before the sun. He turned toward the window. Outside, the sky remained unchanged. The darkness existed only inside the room. And then he saw her. Rose, standing beside the doorway. Not transparent, not monstrous. Simply a young woman in a dark Victorian dress. For several seconds, neither spoke. Benjamin could hear his own heartbeat. Rose regarded him sadly. "You should not have come." Her voice sounded perfectly normal. That frightened him more than any ghostly whisper could have. "Miss Carrington?" She lowered her eyes. "You know my name." "The village remembers." A faint smile touched her face. "No." She looked around the room. "The village remembers the house." The smile faded. "Almost no one remembers us." Benjamin took a cautious step forward. "What happened here?" Rose seemed about to answer. Then her expression changed. Fear. Genuine fear. She turned sharply toward the hallway. "You must leave." "Why?" "It is waking." A distant sound echoed through the manor. A door opening. somewhere below. Then another. Then footsteps. Many footsteps. Benjamin felt the floor vibrating slightly beneath his boots. What is happening? Rose backed toward the far wall. The evening is beginning again. Before he could ask what she meant, she vanished. Not dramatically, not with mist or light. One moment she stood there. The next, the room was empty. Only the piano remained, and the melody had stopped. Benjamin hurried into the corridor. The house had changed. The silence was gone. Voices drifted through the walls. Faint conversations. Laughter. The click of silverware. The crackle of a fire. He hurried toward the staircase. Below him, the entrance hall no longer appeared abandoned. Light flickered from the drawing room. Warm, golden light. Impossible light. Benjamin descended cautiously. The air smelled different now. Freshly cooked food, burning candles, polished wood. The scent of a lived-in house. The scent of 1871. He reached the drawing room doorway and froze. 4 people occupied the room. Arthur Carrington stood near the fireplace reading a newspaper. Eleanor Carrington sat beside the fire with embroidery in her lap. Daniel played on the carpet with a wooden soldier. Rose sat quietly at the piano. Benjamin stared. The family appeared completely alive. Not ghosts, not phantoms. Living people going about an ordinary evening. None of them noticed him. He watched in fascination. The scene unfolded naturally. Arthur commented upon the weather. Eleanor laughed softly. Daniel complained about school. For a brief moment, Benjamin forgot where he was, forgot what he was witnessing. Then Arthur removed his pocket watch. His expression darkened. The clocks have stopped again. The room fell silent. Eleanor looked toward the grandfather clock. Daniel stopped playing. Only Rose seemed unsurprised. Benjamin followed their gaze. Every clock displayed the same time. 11:47. A terrible unease settled over the room. Even the fire seemed quieter. Rose slowly rose from the piano bench. "Father?" Arthur looked toward her. The girl appeared frightened, truly frightened. Then came the knock. 3 slow knocks upon the front door. Every person in the room froze. Benjamin felt his blood turn cold. The sound seemed wrong somehow, too heavy, too deliberate. Not a visitor requesting entry, something announcing its arrival. Arthur crossed the room. "Arthur," Eleanor whispered, but he continued toward the hall. The second knock sounded, louder. The house trembled slightly. Daniel began to cry. Rose looked toward Benjamin. For the first time she saw him. Not the replay, the real Rose. The trapped Rose. Standing behind the memory. "Don't let him open it," she said. Benjamin rushed forward instinctively, but he could not touch them. His hands passed through Arthur's shoulder like smoke. The third knock echoed through the house. Arthur opened the door. Fog poured inside. Not ordinary fog. This moved with purpose, flowing across the floor like living water. The temperature plummeted. Candles flickered. The clocks began ticking wildly. Fast. Far too fast. Benjamin backed away. The fog spread through the hall. The walls seemed to stretch. The ceiling rose higher. Reality itself bent beneath its touch. The Carrington family stood frozen, unable to move, unable to flee. Rose appeared beside Benjamin once more. Not the memory, the real Rose. Her face was pale. It's taking them. What is it? I don't know. Her voice trembled. It came from the fog. The white mist reached Arthur first, his outline blurred. Then Eleanor, then Daniel. One by one, they faded. Not dying, not vanishing, being erased. Like words disappearing from a page. Daniel dropped his wooden soldier. The toy struck the floor. The sound echoed unnaturally. Rose gripped Benjamin's arm. You have to leave. What about you? A sad smile touched her face. I stayed too long. The hallway behind them darkened. Benjamin suddenly realized something horrifying. He could no longer remember the driver who had brought him to Willow End. The man's face was gone. Then the station. Then parts of the journey. His memories were disappearing. The house was remembering him. Rose saw the realization in his eyes. Run. The floor shook violently. Portraits fell from the walls. The fog surged upward. Benjamin turned and fled. The corridor stretched impossibly ahead. Doors appeared where none had existed before. Voices called his name. Familiar voices. His mother's voice. Old friends. Children from his classroom. Every door offered something he had lost. Every voice begged him to stop. He ran faster. At the end of the corridor stood a narrow servant's door. Rose pointed toward it. Go! Benjamin hesitated. Come with me! For the first time, tears filled her eyes. I can't. The darkness behind her deepened. The house was reclaiming her. Benjamin reached for her hand. Their fingers touched, cold as ice. For one impossible second, he thought he might pull her free. Then the house screamed. The sound erupted through every wall simultaneously. Rose gasped. The darkness seized her. Not visibly, not physically, simply pulling her backward into the shadows. Remember me, she whispered. Then she was gone. The door burst open. Benjamin stumbled into the night. Cold air struck his face. He ran across the field without looking back. The fog chased him. The piano music rose behind him. Faster now. Desperate. Broken. Halfway across the field he turned. Carrington Hall stood blazing with light. Every window illuminated. every room alive. Figures moved behind the glass. The entire house seemed caught between existence and disappearance. Then slowly, impossibly, it began to dissolve. The roof vanished first, then the chimneys, then the upper floors. The fog swallowed everything, window by window, wall by wall, until only one remained, an upstairs window. Rose stood there, watching him. She raised one hand. Then the final window faded. The house disappeared. Morning found Benjamin beside the gate. The field was empty. No manor, no ruins, no foundations, nothing. Only grass. And lying near his feet was a small wooden soldier. Daniel Carrington's toy. Benjamin picked it up. The wood felt cold, real. The only proof that Carrington Hall had ever returned. Years later, long after he had left Willow End, Benjamin would keep the soldier on his desk. Visitors often asked where it came from. He never answered. Some stories are too strange for ordinary conversation. But every October, when fog gathered beyond his window, Benjamin would find himself listening, waiting. And sometimes, very late at night, just before midnight, he would hear a faint piano melody drifting through the darkness. The same melody Rose Carrington had played. The melody of a house that had been demolished. A family that had vanished. And a place waiting patiently beyond time for the next fog to bring it home again. Well then, you've made it all the way to the end. Some listeners leave early. Some grow uneasy when the night grows too quiet. But you stayed. And if you enjoyed tonight's ghostly tale, feel free to like the video, share it with a fellow night wanderer, and subscribe to the channel. It helps keep the lantern burning and the stories coming. Thank you for listening. Until we meet again for more short ghost stories, long after midnight.